Welcome everyone, Questini here with my race tier list for Total War Warhammer 3, patch 5.0, post 5.0. Now, before I start talking about the races, I do need to indicate something. This tier list is not just based on the idea of like, oh, which races are strong and which races are weak. It's also a question of campaign replayability, variety, all of those kind of things. Also, one thing that I'm going to remove points from is if you have certain races, and they do exist, where they are strong, they're well built, but they do trivialize the campaign experience. Can be fun if you just want the steamroll campaign, but to be certain, it is something that's going to get boring after a while. So anyway, let's start with the Beastmen. The Beastmen, I would argue, are a mediocre race in Warhammer 3. Not a weak race by any means, but just a mediocre one in the sense that when the Beastmen were reworked at the very end of Warhammer 2, the last DLC for Warhammer 2, they were a great race. Really great job from Creative Assembly there, but I just don't think they fit the meta well of Warhammer 3. A powerful race, but because of the dread mechanic and using that for everything, be it upgrades, unit caps, hero caps, getting Legendary Lords, you end up in a situation where the best thing you can do in a Beastmen campaign is ignore the unit caps, get as many of the other Legendary Lords as possible, get all the faction upgrades, and then you can start steamrolling the campaign map. So certainly a race with a good amount of potential, absolutely, but just a pretty boring playstyle for like 30 plus turns of a campaign, maybe even longer than that. And really with a weak baseline roster, I think like with a unit capacity situation, that would be good if we had some unit caps from the very beginning. I'm not just talking like one unit, like I'm talking like maybe 4 units. Some mods do that and they make the situation better. Like if you had 4 unit capacity, at least for, the early game units. Late game, wouldn't matter quite as much, but early stuff, yeah, it would certainly make create better variety. And another thing about the Beastmen is that they do lack Legendary Lord campaign variety in the sense that Tarax is above all the others, and others are just not really that fun or interesting. So yeah, Beastmen, mediocre race. Brettonia, also a mediocre race. Now, to be clear, Brettonia has an amazing economy. They do have the highest growth of any campaign. They have incredible control. They have the best cavalry in the game. They also have good artillery. Don't underestimate those trebuchets because they can do a significant amount of damage and you can recruit them fairly early on, which in itself is its own benefit. However, the vow system is not a great system by any stretch of imagination. The research tree that Brettonia has is not great. Also, the lack of good infantry and archers just, does diminish Brettonia from my perspective in terms of like campaign enjoyment. Like, it's been a long time since Brettonia got any new additions in Total War Warhammer in general. Like, people have been saying, like, 2019. And I do think they need certain updates to make them better in a campaign experience. Whether or not we'll get that is a big open question because apparently, like, Games Workshop is preventing CA from adding units from the old world into Warhammer 3. Which, honestly, if they could add, like, things like Foot Knights and all that, that would make for a better experience from my perspective. And certainly, while cavalry does work very well, the problem is it's also accessibility of cavalry. Yes, you have good growth. Yes, you have a good economy. But you look at Brettonian campaigns, response is pretty solid. But the other ones, you got the guy in the jungle, and that's where all I need to say, who also needs to take Sartosa for his quest item. Then you got Lewin, who's getting screwed over by Bellicor from the north, and then Kemmler from the south. And yeah, just plenty of issues in the design of Brettonia as a territory on the campaign map. The design of Brettonia's recruitment system and all that. Like, to give you an idea, the Empire can get more plentiful cavalry and easier to access cavalry than Brettonia. Like, long term, it will work, don't get me wrong. It's certainly a workable campaign, but yeah, just plenty of issues. Chaos Dwarves, a perfect race. Like, they have their weaknesses and they are limited by the unit caps, but unlike, say, the Beastmen, their baseline units that they can recruit are fairly good, and you don't have limitations on hero capacity early on in a campaign. Lots of power, army abilities, faction abilities, great Legendary Lords, great campaign design, great terrain of their campaign areas, minus Zaytan to a certain extent, but you can make that work as well. I think like Zaytan got the short end of the stick, but like, Chaos Dwarves Creative Assembly really nailed it. Like, making a really powerful race, but also a race that has some weaknesses because you have to worry about industry, you have to worry about income. You may not have as much money as other races because you're obviously getting materials and you're getting armaments. But like, this is the kind of race where, yeah, you can end up being very weak, but if you play your cards right, you can have a great time. And also you have the end times from the very beginning with Grimgor next to you or close enough to you in every single campaign. Just great campaign experiences overall with the cast dwarves. The Demon Prince, yeah, beyond trash. Like, honestly, I'm tempted to just not forget about Daniel. Like, Daniel doesn't even deserve a spot on this list. That's my perspective on this. Like, forget Daniel. He doesn't exist. That's my perspective. I'm not even including him on this tier list. He's just that awful. Like, he's not just beyond trash. He is way, way lower than that. Awful campaign, bad campaign design, bad character design. Like, how do you make an interesting tutorial campaign and then completely screw over the same character that you designed for that is beyond me. So yeah, Daniel doesn't deserve a spot on this particular list. Dark Elves. Amazing race. They do lack Legendary Lord campaign variety. There are some mods that do fix that. So they do have that weakness, but like in terms of racial design, like just great economy, but also with some weaknesses. Instant construction like the Cast Dwarves, slave mechanic like the Cast Dwarves. Could use a new UI, I imagine. Like, but the main weakness of the Dark Elves is just like that lack of campaign variety, but at the same time, really amazing race. Like, there's a lot of things to like about the Dark Elves. I understand why they're not so popular, like the lack of campaign variety, but great racial design. It's not the racial design that's holding back the Dark Elves. It's more so their Legendary Lord design and campaign design. But yeah, just an amazing experience, though. Like, lots of good units, lots of potential, diplomatic potential, economic potential, all around, just good climate. A lot of things that you can like. Then we have the dwarves, and by the way, if I was going with this list, like, I would possibly rate them like this. Like, the dwarves were previously either trash or beyond trash race. Now, I would dare say they're one of the best races in the game, the best actually race to play in the game, and it's a combination of things. One, dwarves are very powerful in their roster, and they do have a lot of variety of units from the very get-go, like getting Thunderers and Iron Drakes at tier 2 makes such a wonderful experience. Artillery, infantry, ranged units, heroes, hero capacity, just an overall amazing experience. And then what elevates the dwarves from my perspective in terms of a tier list, just moving Brettonia over there above the Beastmen, because yeah, they are better. What elevates the dwarves above virtually every other race, I think, in the game is just the sheer number of things you can do. Because, you know, Distant Confederation with Legendary Lords, Beastmen can do that too, but it's much better because you just get the Legendary Lord when you confederate as Beastmen. With dwarves, you get their territory as well. So, yeah, you get a lot of things, lots of potential, lots of power, lots of possibilities in a campaign, but also vulnerabilities, or more so, lots of enemies to deal with, like Malachi McKayson, extremely powerful Legendary Lord, but has a great campaign because you're surrounded by all foes on all sides. And the thing that separates the dwarves from virtually all the other races is the sheer variety of things you have to do, because you have territorial expansion as normal, but then you have grudges, then you have legendary grudges, then you have to worry about the other Legendary Lords and how well they're doing because you can confederate them. And then you add on to that the campaign that Malachi has with his adventures. It's just like it creates a very amazing experience for the dwarves. I mean, Forik and Belagar are not quite as great, but like, yeah, Ungrim, Grumbrindle, Malachi have amazing campaigns. Even Thorgrim is pretty good. It's just the fact that, you know, those three have Frozen, whereas Thorgrim doesn't, so that's a bit of a limitation for him, but just like great campaign variety as well. So amazing job for Creative Assembly. From Creative Assembly with that. A good race, the Empire. I'm not quite sure I would want to put them in a perfect tier. See, while the Empire does have great artillery, probably the best artillery in the game, it's a discussion. Do you want to consider a Thunderbarge an artillery piece? That's up to you. But the Empire does have a lot more possibilities than before. Like magic, like heroes have been buffed, lords have been buffed, magic feels better. Luminarchs are actually quite very damn useful at the moment. Yeah, I know it's shocking, but Luminarchs are actually a good unit now. The one thing that I think holds them back, or two things hold them back, Mark's Twelfheart and Volkmar have terrible campaigns, and beyond that, they do lack a good infantry roster. And yes, they do have great cavalry, skirmish cavalry, melee cavalry, charge cavalry, shock cavalry, whatever. Great artillery, great heroes, great campaign design for Karl Franz Elspeth. Again, some amazing campaigns, lots of power in those campaigns, lots of variety as well in those campaigns. The one thing that holds them back is having a great infantry roster. Like, I think Imperial infantry is just not as good as, the S tier race. Like, you put Chaos Dwarf Warriors versus everything the Empire has in an infantry roster, they'll win. You put even Dwarf Warriors or Blackheart Corsairs, yeah, like, Great Swords could beat Blackheart Corsairs, but they're the only things that would beat them. So yeah, just that limitation in two campaigns that are not in a great spot and are pretty awful. Like, it's one thing for Belegar and Fork to be below the other dwarf campaigns. It's another thing to have awful campaigns for your race and have limitations. But really great design from Creative Assembly there. Grand Cathay, it's a good race, not quite as versatile as the Empire, but it's like, I used to say it before, and I'll say it again, Cathay pre 5.0 was a race that did an Empire campaign better than the actual Empire. Now, I would say Cathay is behind. They do lack replenishment, they do lack some of the uniqueness, or a lot of the uniqueness that the Empire has in their campaign, Plurs, Yao Ming, and Miao Ying. Like, they just feel lackluster compared to Yan Bo. But, like, look, Cathay is a good race, good economy, lots of potential, caravans, lots of good fun to be had in Cathay and campaigns. Yao Ming is a really powerful lord despite, terrain limitations and all that. Yan Bo, lots of power. Can get pretty boring, I admit. Like, I just get tired of recruiting Jade Warriors and Jade Warrior crossbowmen, so I think, like, maybe some recruitment changes would be in order for that. But, like, yeah, I can't really complain about Cathay. It's not a perfect race, but they are a good race. The thing that you're going to feel the most is the lack of replenishment, I would dare say. Like, that's the only negative I can give with Cathay. Like, add a DLC with a legendary hero, or a hero that gives, or with a regular hero, a generic hero that gives replenishment. Cathay would, and more units, more variety. Yeah, Cathay would be a perfect race. Really great job with respect to that. Greenskins, another S tier race, and I'm going to rank them above the Dark Elves. Like, what is there to say about Greenskins? Like, ever since they were remade in Warden and Punch, they've been an amazing race. Yes, Skarsnik is a joke of a campaign. Morzak, possibly not that interesting. Rom has some issues, but Grimgor, I mean, Jesus, Grimgor. Even Azag, like, very interesting campaigns with both Azag and Grimgor. And it's not like Wurzag or Skarsnik are that freaking horrible. And look, Grom can work very well and can be extremely interesting in the early game, just that, late game limitation because of climate. But hey, you want to pick a fight with Olaf Wolfwan as Grom? You can do so. You want to get the Sword of Cain on the big fat goblin? You can do so. It can be a lot of fun, just that early game situation. Grimgor and Azang more so for longer campaigns. Skarsnik, yeah, not worth it. Worth it more for the units to get his DLC, but still. Greenskins are a great race, powerful race. They work well within the context of Total War, which is based on aggression. They have an interesting play style. They have a lot of power, but they also have a lot of enemies because, yeah, a lot of people do hate them. So just overall a great design for them. High Elves, I would dare say High Elves are better than Cathay. They do have severe limitations in terms of, like, hero capacity, army variety, so, like, just how easy it is to recruit units, research problems, etc. But at least they do have a replenishment hero. And honestly, they have a lot more variety in their campaigns than Cathay does. So that's the reason I'm ranking them above Cathay. Like, just a really good race. Good beginner race. Good race to play campaigns over and over with. The only campaign that's actually bad for High Elves is Techless. Like, yeah, I'm not necessarily too fond of Elfarian for a lot of reasons. But it's still a very workable campaign. Just frustrations over there with, having to fight a lot of manual battles to capture lords in battle. Just kind of annoying of a mechanic. But, like, High Elves have been a great race, or a good race, ever since they were introduced in Warhammer 2. Possibly one of the best races in Warhammer 2. Haven't quite scaled as well in Warhammer 3, but still, you can't go wrong playing a High Elven campaign. Like, just good amount of fun. Khorne. Oh boy. This is where I'm going to get a lot of backlash, but I think Khorne is a weak race. Like, very limited recruitment options because you don't have money. A very focused campaign on a particular playstyle. And look, I just think, like, the idea of a campaign where you're burning everything to the ground just doesn't work quite well. And it doesn't work well, like, if it doesn't work well for Beastmen who at least build those Hearthstones, it certainly doesn't work very well for Khorne. You're just But like, consider this difference between Khorne and Greenskins. Greenskin or Dark Elves or Chaos Dwarves or even regular Dwarves. But like, let's just focus on Greenskins. With Greenskins, you burn settlements to the ground, right? You sack them, you loot them, you occupy them, all that. But you're still building an empire because you have all the tools. Your units are not that expensive. You can maintain large armies. You can have a lot of fun. You can be very aggressive. Khorne is just about one army and a gimmick in the Bloodhost. That's it. And it's not even a great Khorne campaign. Like, Valkia is a much better campaign because you have better army variety. You have actual armies as opposed to the gimmick of Bloodhost. Like, I think, like, just the design of building a race around the idea, like, oh, you're going to get disposable armies with no replenishment is just not really a good idea. And I wish Creative Assembly would abandon that freaking concept, because if there's any criticism I would have of the Dwarves is those Grudge Seller armies. But I'll take one Grudge Seller army every 15 turns as opposed to the 7 fucking Bloodhosts I have to manage in a Khorne campaign. You could decide not to ignore it, but you're missing out on quite a bit of power. It's just not a great playstyle over there. You don't even get to experience really the entire full Khorne roster, because, like, yeah, the best way to play Khorne is win the campaign very quickly, because you don't have the late game scalability to match other races who are going to throw a lot more armies against you. So yeah, it just doesn't feel like a great campaign. Like, can be fun to a limited extent. You know, can be fun for people if they're just looking to play a faction where they have one powerful army and they want to make that work. Sure, I get that, but like, the best races have replayability, different play styles, a lot of unit variety that you can actually recruit, being able to field multiple armies, and that's just something that Khorne doesn't. And yes, you get variety of units with the Bloodhost, I get it, but I would rather recruit Bloodthirsters in my own armies as opposed to just spawning them for a fucking mechanic like that. Just my perspective on it. I think Khorne, like, I get why a lot of people like Khorne, but it's not a great campaign. Certainly not for a veteran player. You know, certainly doesn't have the replayability of other races. Kislev. I'm going to go and say Kislev is a race that's in trash tier. Not quite beyond trash, though I am certainly tempted to put them in that perspective. But, you know, the Norska climate changes do help them a bit. The problem with Kislev is they have a good army roster. They have heroes, they have replenishment, they have good legendary lords, but it's like the supporter system, the devotion system, or Stankia's mechanic, they just feel weak and annoying, really. It doesn't feel like a great campaign to play. It's like you're constantly fighting the systems that are present in those campaigns. Like, I don't give a shit about the Stankia's curses. I only build them to unlock her army, her faction abilities. Like, I couldn't care so much about it. It can be useful when you're dealing with a powerful opponent, but it's not really a great campaign by any means. In fact, I would say Ostanka is my least favorite Kislev campaign, and yeah, CA screwed up. Shadows of Change. Like, Kislev needed a race rework. They needed it since day one. The issues that Kislev has had since day one, and it's like, oh, let's just add more units. Can you fix the economy? Can you fix devotion? Can you fix the victory conditions for Castalton and Katrin? Boros Ursus can be a good amount of fun, but even with Boros Ursus, they end up getting frustrated. If you do play a modded Kislev campaign where you get economic benefits, more devotion, all that, and there are certainly easy mods to access, it can be a lot more fun. Like, it can be a good campaign, though I probably would say, like, it's not as good as the Empire is, because, yeah, there's a difference between what CA can accomplish and any modder can accomplish. Moving on, Lizardmen. This is an interesting one. Yeah, I would say that Lizardmen are a trash race. Like, they're not so weak compared to other factions, but it's just like a lot of frustration. Like, requiring tier 4 to even recruit many of the heroes in your campaign, or all the heroes except the one in a campaign, is frustrating. Limitations on growth, limitations on construction time, like, it's slow to construct stuff as the Lizardmen, and honestly, a lot of their campaigns just feel bad, and in many significant ways. You're very slow in navigating the jungle, you're dealing with a lot of jungle in the campaigns, like, screw the jungle climate. Like, the least interesting areas of a campaign are, like, the Southlands with all the jungle there, which does affect things like Teclis, and maybe even Kairos, depending on how you want to view things there. But at least Kairos has teleportation. You don't. Like, yeah, it's so silly that a race native to the jungle can't do well in the jungle. Oxyotl is a lot of fun, undeniably so, but one good campaign does not make up for the race shortcomings, and even Oxyotl has his own limitations. Like, having limitations on hero recruitment in the first place just makes campaigns less interesting from my point of view. how do they make a race of dinos riding dinos boring is beyond me, but it is pretty dull. And I think, like, yeah, Lizardmen need a rework. Norska, beyond trash, like, undeniably so. They only have one lore choice. They have a lot of unit roster issues. They have severe campaign problems. And it's less so about power and more so like their campaign mechanics just feel very annoying to engage in, like having to sack a settlement for money because you need it, otherwise you're going to go bankrupt. Then having to raise that settlement for favorite gods and then rebuild it because you need the territory in itself, especially certain settlements that are attached to your tech tree. Yeah, Norska certainly has needed improvements. They absolutely need a DLC. They've needed it for a long time. They were released for Warhammer 1, added in Warhammer 2, and it took them a long time to do so, and there's just lots and lots of issues with respect to Norska. They feel abandoned. They are one of the worst cast factions to actually play in the game right now, by far. Moving on, Nurgle. I'm going to say that Nurgle is a mediocre race. Maybe even a weak race. Honestly, no. I wouldn't say they're weak, but it's like severe, climate limitations because you have a lot of campaigns surrounded by mountains, and mountains are not suitable climate. That is freaking annoying. Limitations on how many units you can afford. Though they did improve that with infections. Like by buffing infections to 100 and hopefully buffing them more, they will improve the situation. But yeah, Nurgle, it's not a good campaign. It's a workable one. You will not hate your life. I would certainly say it's better than either Brettonia and Beastmen at this point, but we went from Nurgle from a beyond trash race, one of the worst races to play in the game, to a mediocre rating, so a B rating. So this would be S, A, B. So yeah, Nurgle is a B tier race if you want to consider that. And I do think they do have the power right now. They do have a lot of potential, and Tamarkan's campaign can be a lot of fun and kind of hilarious with all the warlords constantly bickering among each other. But just like, I don't think it works nowhere near as well as the campaigns above it. That would be my perspective. Ogres. Can we make a new rating that's called Daniel and just put the ogres there? Because I'm tempted to do it. But no. They are a beyond trash race, horrible economy, horrible units actually. Like, ogre units should be a lot more powerful, but there's some weird thing with the way they behave now. Like, yeah, charges are really powerful with ogres. Ogre charges are extremely powerful, especially when you get food for it. But like when units are standing still, like I had Iron Guts fighting against freaking goblin archers and taking forever to kill them. That is so bizarre. And Iron Guts are a tier 3 unit. Like consider this. You know what the unit of Warriors of Chaos, Sword and Shield, not the gray weapon one. You know what the unit of Warriors of Chaos would do to goblin archers if they got in melee? They would obliterate them. Ogres apparently can't do that. There's just some weird thing. Like, they're not monsters, so they don't have the benefits that monsters do in battle, but they're not regular infantry as well. They just kind of feel like a hybrid between that. And I think they suffer from an animation issue, and that's the least of their problems. Their campaign mechanics are awful. The ogre camps don't work well. Settlement limitations, recruitment limitations, income limitations, horribly designed race. Like, it is pretty telling that some of the worst races in the game have been pre-order bonuses. Norska pre-order bonus for Warhammer 2, though originally added in Warhammer 1. Ogre's pre-order bonus for Warhammer 3. Can we start with the pre-order bonus races, CA? Because you've done a horrible job every single time. At least it does seem like with Pharaoh, with Pharaoh, they've abandoned the fucking model. But yeah, like, horrible thing. Horrible design over there. Skaven, a good race. Certainly, I would say like a Skaven campaign is better than a High Elf campaign. Like, just a lot of power. They're not perfect. They have some limitations, but you can work around that. I would say like it's annoying dealing with an Inca Claw campaign just because of the terrain limitation. Because yeah, you're surrounded on all sides by enemies. You can make it work. Don't get me wrong. With Skaven, but look, Skaven are a good race. They just have certain limitations. They need territories that have at least 3 regions to make their economy work in those. A lot of people hate them for bloody good reason, I would add. If you look at Skaven lore, yeah, bloody good reason. But yeah, it's a good race. Look, don't get me wrong. Just because it's not perfect doesn't mean it's not a good race. Doesn't mean you won't have fun. You will, but it's not quite as preposterous as Dwarves, Chaos Dwarves, Greenskins, and Dark Elves can be. Slaanesh. I'm betting Khorne and Slaaneshi fans are going to be happy with that, but yeah, Slaanesh is a weak race. Better in the early game in some ways, like the Wolf 1 campaign is really fun to play once, and that's it. Like, lots of issues. I do detest a race that's reliant on vassalization to get any real level of power, but that's the case for Slaaneshi factions. You have a lot of power with cults and vassalization, but lack of replenishment and just a fairly dull playstyle once you do conquer all of Wolf 1, it does leave a lot to be desired, right? Because, like, once you take Wolf 1 and subjugate Alariel, Tyrion, and Alfarian, it's like, GG, you've won. There's nothing that can stop you, but that doesn't mean it's a great campaign. So, can be fun, can be a real challenge, can be something you sink your teeth into, and yes, I do consider Slaanesh better than Khorne to play. Just better variety in that, more, and because of the cults that you can get on global level, quite a few benefits there. I do think Slaanesh then needs some improvements, replenishment hero, and a playstyle that doesn't just rely on, oh, I subjugated X number of legendary lords, I've won the campaign, nothing can stand in my path. Like, I do appreciate the vassalization changes that Creative Assembly has made, but I think the system needs further improvement to actually be enjoyable, because, yeah, herding cats is not fun. Though at least it works. Tomb Kings. You know what? I've come to the conclusion that they're a trash race. I'm sorry. Like, honestly, I would even rate them lower than Kislev on this. Like, I'm going to go with that. I'm going to say it. Like, they're not a horrible race in terms of their power. Their economy works. Their unit works. Their armies work. But it's just so many limitations. They do genuinely... Like, if they got an improvement, they could either be a good or even perfect race. But, like, just too many early game limitations. Archon can be a lot more fun, to be certain. But, yeah, I think, like, Tomb Kings have really... Like, the campaign objectives, the lack of confederation, the fact that you can vassalize for diplomacy, but oh, you have to control all of Khemri, the Books of Nagash system, just lots and lots of frustrations. Like, even for Archon, who does start with an extra army and extra unit, so he doesn't have the same frustrations as the other campaigns in a great starting position, even for Archon, just doesn't feel like a great, superb experience. And for the others, Khalida, Cetra, and Katep, yeah, just bad campaign design. Like, it made sense in the context of Warhammer 2. I wish to state this. It made sense in the context of Warhammer 2 to impose these limitations, because the meta of Warhammer 2 was about maintaining, you know, a couple of armies for much of the early game, but that's not the meta of Warhammer 3 anymore, at the very least. So, yeah. Tzeentch. Not quite as... it's hard to say. Like, is it bad? Is it worse than Norska, or is it better than Norska? Yeah, it's worse than Norska. You know, Norska has a lot of frustrations in their campaign, but they just don't quite feel as painful to play as Tzeentch. Like, the Changeling campaign is probably the single worst fucking campaign in the game. Like, genuinely so. Like, it's very powerful, but it's dull as dirt. Like, people say, like, oh, dwarves can be steamrolling. No, dwarves have a lot of things that they have to worry about. Tides of Skaven, Greenskins, Chaos. Changeling just screws around, does whatever the fuck he wants, and doesn't care about the consequences. Kairos, just awful campaign, honestly. Like, just really horrible campaign. And yes, we get new units and replenishment, but, like, really, Tzeentch does need better mechanics. Like, you want to play a magic campaign? A campaign focused on magic? Play fucking Gelt. That's the best magical legendary lord in the game by far. Like, if I was talking about just purely Gelt, yeah, like, Gelt is an amazing campaign, like, just really great. And it's like, that is the standard Mazamundi tech list and Kairos need to reach. Until we get to that point, Tzeentch is going to be a trash tier race to play in the game. Just one of the worst races in the game, by far, to play. Not really enjoyable. Very boring. Even when you are powerful, even when you do make the campaign work, it's just so fucking dull. Like, it's because, like, you just recruit Chaos Warriors and then you get chosen and you start to Forsaken and Sangors. And then you move on to Warriors of Chaos, and it's like, oh, I make melee blobs that kill everything in my path. That's fun. No, it's not. It's just an awful thing. Vampire Coast. Daniel tier, as I'm going to call it. Okay, I'll just put Daniel here at the very bottom, right? But no. Vampire Coast, just another race like the Tomb Kings or Norska that was designed, you know, for a different era, and just didn't make the transition well in Warhammer 3. Awful race to play. I'd say possibly a bit better than Ogres, but only just barely. Just really horrible campaign. You're not even a naval domination faction. Dark Elves are much better at naval domination than you are. Night and day, Black Arcs work a lot better than your Horde armies, and don't even get me started with all the power the Dark Elves have in other ways. You're not even a great artillery faction, because yeah, I would dare say even freaking Brettonia beats you in terms of artillery, because you know what makes a good artillery gunpowder faction? Having a variety of units to help you in different situations, because gunpowder units have shortcomings. This is the thing that makes Skaven work, a gunpowder faction, artillery faction, because Skaven have a lot of things. They have fast-moving units. They don't have flyers, sure, but they can get good infantry. They can get good fast-moving units. They can get good magic. They can get a lot of heroes. Empire, Cav, flying units, you know, limited to be sure, but flying heroes at the very least, and flying lords. And lots of artillery prowess. Vampire Coast is just so awful. Like, the Cove mechanic doesn't work. Their economy doesn't work. Their unit roster is pure garbage. People will argue, oh, you just got to play them properly. I'm like, okay, let me tell you what's going to happen. Like, people argue that, oh, you need to use terrestrial formation. Yeah, terrestrial formation doesn't work against an enemy that has range power. Like, it's such a... Like, the arguments I've heard in favor of the Vampire Coast, I'm sorry, they just fall flat. It doesn't match reality. And the reason it doesn't work, something like the terrestrial doesn't work, is, like, do you know why the terrestrial was no longer used in reality? Yeah, cannons got better and lighter. And suddenly, those packed formations get obliterated. What do you think happens when you're dealing with the mass range power of Skaven, Empire, Dwarves even, when you're playing Vampire Coast? You can win with the power of your heroes, your very limited heroes, and the power of your lords and army abilities, but yeah, the army roster is awful. The economy doesn't support even that pathetic army roster, and it's just not a great situation. Having a faction where you have ranged undead units with low survivability and low leadership is an awful experience. It can work better if you're a melee faction, like it can work better if you're a melee faction like the Vampire Counts. Vampire Counts are a good race because, yes, they may have a lot of those units with weak leadership and survivability, but melee, just get in melee with enemy. You have powerful lords, powerful heroes, a good amount of economy, good amount of diplomatic potential as well, huge amount of variety in the campaigns. Yes, Manfred sucks, and Gorse is not that great either, but Kemler, Vlad, and Isabella, pretty good lords to play, pretty fun to play. Like, just the sheer amount of possibilities you have in a campaign as either Kemler or Vlad, really fun, really interesting. Diplomatic possibilities, army possibilities, hero possibilities. Like, it does work. It does work a lot better than people might give it credit for. Like, it's interesting to think about the Vampire Counts because they are a race that came out at the beginning of Warhammer, Total War Warhammer, with Warhammer 1. They never have gotten a rework. They only had one paid DLC that just added some units that you could live completely without. And yet they've always maintained their relevance. So yeah, a good race, some weaknesses that prevent them from being a perfect race, but still. Warriors of Chaos and Wood Elves, I'm going to put both these in the strong but too easy tier. And what do I mean by that? Wood Elves and Warriors of Chaos are phenomenally designed races, but they're too strong. Like, they trivialize their campaign. And so you play one campaign, it can be fun once in a while, when you just want to steamroll stuff. But it does get boring very quickly. Like, your basic units as Wood Elves are really powerful. Warriors of Chaos get a lot of power as well. Very few things can stand in your way. And like with Nakari, and you do get to a point, at least as the Warriors of Chaos, where you just vassalize everyone and then it's like cakewalk. But unlike Nakari, for Nakari you at least have to work for that, right? With Warriors of Chaos you don't, because your basic armies are more powerful than anything else. Your lords are very powerful, your faction effects are powerful. As for Wood Elves, they just feel very dull because, like, yeah, Glade Guard, Treekin, let alone their flying units, cavalry, and just infantry units, heroes. Like, yeah, they're really, really powerful, but just like the intern button simulator, really. Ryan can be fun, I guess, if you declare war on the entire freaking world, but that's roughly about it. So this would be my race tier list in terms of enjoyment of campaigns. Let me know what you guys think about all of this. Which races do you think I got wrong? Which races do you think I got right? I'm sure plenty of people will be pissed off about Khorne, but you know what? I stand by it. I don't think it's a great race. I think it's a race that people really pushed too hard as being great when it's not. And you know what? By the way, I'm just going to mention it. Those people that are fanboys of Khorne, you know what you're doing? You're just screwing yourselves over because it just creates more incentives for Creative Assembly to not touch them and improve them. That's one thing I've got to mention. You know, remember how many people, like there were a lot of people that argued like, oh, the Wars and Empire are fine. Yeah. If CA had listened to you, we would not be in a Thrones of the Decay 5.0 situation. So just being fanboys is not a great idea. That would be my perspective. Like, even the perfect races can always be improved. But yeah, this is my personal tier list. Like, I would certainly recommend the campaigns in perfect and good tier. You can have fun with the other ones, like especially like Brettonia and Nurgle. Beastmen less so. Sludge can be fun once or twice, or however many times. Warriors, Chaos, and Elves are only fun if you're just looking to play a campaign where you have it on easy mode. Others, yeah, just don't freaking bother with them. That would be my perspective, like the lowest tiers over there. Costine signing out.